My dear child, gather close. Tonight, I'm telling you a tale that'll chill your bones. It's about a clock, old and dusty, ticking away in a forgotten house. But this isn't any ordinary clock. When it strikes 13, death itself comes knocking. Someone in that house heard those eerie chimes, and soon shadows moved where they shouldn't. By the end of this story, you'll know what happened to them, and what you should do if you ever hear a clock strike one chime too many. So, sit tight, my child, and listen to Grandpa's tale. The clock strikes 13. Now, let me take you back to a small town called Willow Hollow, nestled deep in a valley where fog clings to the ground like a shroud. The year was 1957, and at the edge of town stood the Grayson House, a crumbling mansion nobody dare visit. Folks said it was cursed. They whispered about the family who lived there long ago, the Graysons, who vanished one night without a trace. All that remained was their old grandfather clock in the parlor, its hands frozen at midnight. Nobody knew why, but the townsfolk swore that clock wasn't right. Some said it ticked when no one wounded. Others said it chimed at strange hours. But the darkest rumor was this. When that clock struck 13, someone in the house would die before dawn. Enter young Tommy Wheeler, a curious boy of 16 who didn't believe in ghost stories. Tommy was like you, my child, brave, maybe a little reckless, always chasing adventure. One autumn evening, Tommy and his friends, Sarah and Ben, made a bet. They'd sneak into the Grayson house to prove it wasn't haunted. The prize? Bragging rights and $1 from each of them. Tommy, with his flashlight and a cocky grin, led the way. The air was cold, the moon barely a sliver, and the wind howled like a warning. But Tommy didn't listen to warnings. The front door creaked as they pushed it open. Dust swirled in their flashlight beams, and the air smelled of mold and something sour. The house was a maze of cobwebs and broken furniture, but there in the parlor stood the grandfather clock. It was taller than Tommy. It was carved with strange symbols, spirals and eyes that seemed to watch them. The clock's face was yellowed, its hands still stuck at midnight. Sarah shivered and whispered they should leave, but Tommy laughed. "It's just a clock," he said. "Let's wind it up and see what happens. Now, my child, here's my first piece of advice. Never tempt fate in a place that feels wrong. Some doors are locked for a reason, and some things are better left alone." But Tommy didn't know that. He opened the clock's glass door and turned the winding key. The gears groaned, and slowly, the clock began to tick. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound echoed through the house, louder than it should have been. Ben grabbed Tommy's arm. "Stop it, man. This ain't right." But Tommy just smirked and kept winding until the clock was fully set. They waited, half expecting something to happen. Nothing did. The clock ticked normally, and Tommy started to tease his friends for being scared. But then, as they turned to leave, the clock chimed. Dong, 1. Dong, 2. The chimes were deep, like a bell tolling in a graveyard. Sarah counted under her breath, her eyes wide. 10, 11, 12. The kids held their breath, waiting for silence. But then, asterisk dong, asterisk 13. A chime that shouldn't exist. The air turned ice cold. The flashlight flickered, and shadows danced on the walls, though nobody moved. Sarah whimpered, "That's not possible." Tommy tried to laugh it off, but his voice shook. "It's just broken," he said. "Let's get out of here." They ran for the door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. The windows wouldn't budge either. The house felt alive, trapping them inside. Here's another lesson, my child. When you feel fear in your gut, trust it. Your instincts know things your mind might ignore. Those kids should have left the moment that clock felt wrong, but now they were stuck. The ticking grew louder, following them as they searched for a way out. In the hallway, they found old portraits of the Grayson family, stern faces with eyes that seemed to follow them. Ben swore he saw one of the paintings blink. Sarah clutched her necklace, a cross her grandma gave her, and started praying. Then they heard it, a whisper, soft and raspy, like dry leaves. "You woke me," it said. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The kids froze, their flashlights shaking. Tommy swung his beam around, but the hallway was empty. "Who's there?" he shouted, trying to sound brave. No answer, just that awful ticking, now joined by footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps coming from upstairs. They bolted into the dining room, barricading the door with a chair. The footsteps stopped, but the whispering didn't. 13 means death, it hissed. Sarah was crying now, saying they were going to die. Ben told her to shut up, but his hands were trembling. Tommy, still trying to be the leader, said they'd find a way out. He suggested checking the basement for a coal chute or another exit. It was a desperate plan, but they had no choice. The basement door was in the kitchen, hidden behind a rotting curtain. As they crept toward it, the clock chimed again. 13 times, each dong shaking the walls. The lights flickered, though the house had no electricity. When the final chime faded, the whispering turned into a low laugh. "You can't run," it said. The kids tore open the basement door and stumbled down the stairs, their flashlights barely cutting through the dark. The basement was a nightmare. Old trunks, broken mirrors, and cobwebs thicker than curtains filled the space. The air was so heavy it felt like breathing mud. In the corner, they found something strange, a pile of bones, human bones, arranged in a circle. Sarah screamed, and Ben gagged. Tommy, pale as a ghost, whispered, "The Graysons, they didn't vanish." Above them, the footsteps started again, coming closer. "Now, my child, let me tell you something important. Fear can make you strong if you use it right. Panic makes you weak, but courage, even when you're scared, can save your life." Those kids were terrified, but they had to keep moving. They searched the basement for an exit, shoving aside crates and debris. That's when they found it, a trapdoor under a rug, leading to a tunnel. It smelled of earth and decay, but it was their only hope. They crawled through the tunnel, dirt falling on their heads, the ticking of the clock still somehow following them. The whispers grew louder, angrier. "You woke me. You pay." Tommy urged his friends to keep going, even as his own heart pounded. Finally, they saw a faint light, a grate leading outside. They pushed with all their strength, and the grate gave way. They tumbled into the grass, gasping, the cold night air shock after the suffocating house. But the nightmare wasn't over. As they ran toward town, the clock's chime echoed through the valley 13 times. Behind them, the Grayson house seemed to shimmer, like it was fading in and out of reality. They didn't stop running until they reached Tommy's house, banging on the door until his parents let them in. They tried to explain, but their words came out jumbled. Tommy's dad, a practical man, said it was just their imagination, but he didn't see the fear in their eyes or hear the faint tick-tock that followed them even now. The next day, the kids went back to the Grayson house with Tommy's dad, hoping to prove what happened, but the house was gone. Not burned, not collapsed, just gone like it had never existed. The lot was empty, overgrown with weeds. The townsfolk said the house had been torn down years ago, but Tommy and his friends knew better. They'd been inside. They'd heard the clock. For weeks after, Tommy couldn't sleep. Every night, he heard that ticking, faint but real. Sarah started going to church every day, clutching her cross. Ben refused to talk about it, but he never went near the edge of town again. They never told anyone else what happened, afraid nobody would believe them. But they made a pact. If any of them ever heard a clock strike 13, they'd run and never look back. Now, my child, you're probably wondering what that clock was. I don't have all the answers, but I've heard stories like this before. Some say that clock was tied to Grayson's sins. Greed, betrayal, maybe worse. Others say it was a gate, holding back something evil. When it struck 13, it let that evil out just for a night. Whatever it was, it marked those kids. Tommy grew up, but he was never the same. He carried that fear until the day he died. Too young, some said, though nobody could explain why. Here's my final advice, my child. Respect the unknown. The world is full of mysteries, and not all of them are kind. If you ever find yourself in a place that feels wrong, where the air is too still, or the shadows move on their own, get out. Don't wait for proof. Don't tempt fate like Tommy did. And if you hear a clock strike 13, run as fast as you can, and don't stop until you're safe.